The airport was quiet that morning. Just the soft hum of rolling suitcases, and rain tapping gently against the tall windows. Nurse Margaret Sullivan sat near gate 14. She wore her blue scrubs, still creased from a long night shift. A foam collar wrapped around her neck. Her wrist was bandaged, wound with white gauze. Her eyes were tired, the kind of tired that sleep alone cannot fix. She was flying home. Home to Ohio. Home to see her mother, who had taken a fall the week before. Beside her sat a stranger. An older man in a Marine Corps uniform, his hair silver, his posture straight as a flagpole. His name, though she did not know it yet, was Colonel Frank Delaney. He was reading a newspaper. Or, he was pretending to. Margaret did not speak to him. She simply lifted her hand, slowly, and made a small circle with her thumb and finger. The rest of her fingers, she raised. Gently. Deliberately. It was not a secret code from a spy movie. It was something far simpler, and far older. Part 2, What the Signal Meant. You see, some years back, long before smartphones buzzed in every pocket, nurses on hospital floors used small hand signals. Quiet ways to say I need help, without alarming a frightened patient, or a frightened family member standing nearby. Margaret had learned this signal from her own mentor, a woman named Dorothy, some 20 years ago. Dorothy used to say, Margaret, sometimes the loudest cry for help is a silence dressed up as calm. That morning, Margaret was not asking for helicopters or handcuffs. She was asking for something far more human. She was asking, someone please notice me. Someone please stay close, because the truth was, Margaret had left an abusive situation 3 days before. The collar on her neck, the bandage on her wrist, those were not from a car accident, as she had told the airline counter. They were something else entirely. Something she was still learning how to say out loud. And in that terminal, surrounded by strangers, she felt suddenly, quietly, unsafe. Part 3, The Colonel notices. Colonel Delaney had spent 31 years in the United States Marine Corps. He had trained thousands of young men and women. He had seen fear in many forms, on battlefields, in briefing rooms, in the eyes of new recruits far from home. But this was different. He noticed the way her hand trembled just slightly, even as she tried to still it. He noticed how her eyes moved toward the terminal doors every few minutes, quick, like a bird checking for a hawk. He lowered his newspaper. Slowly. Carefully. He did not want to startle her. Ma'am, he said softly. Is there someone I should call for you? Margaret's eyes filled, just for a moment. She blinked the tears back, the way nurses learn to do, quickly, professionally, without letting the patient see. No, she whispered. But, thank you for asking. The colonel nodded. He understood. Sometimes, the kindest thing a person can offer, is simply presence. Not answers. Not solutions. Just, presence. He folded his newspaper and set it in his lap. And he stayed. Part 4, The man by the window. Across the terminal, near the rain-streaked windows, stood a man named Richard Halloway. Richard was the CEO of Lakeside Regional Hospital, the very hospital where Margaret worked. He had just landed from a conference in Chicago. He was checking his phone, scrolling through emails, when something caught the corner of his eye. He looked up. And he froze. Because Richard recognized that hand signal instantly. He had seen it only once before, years ago, when he was a young administrator walking hospital corridors at night. A nurse had used it to alert security, quietly, about a patient's family member who had grown volatile. Richard's hands rose to his temples. His mouth opened, just slightly, in shock. That is one of my nurses, he thought. And she is signaling for help. He did not shout. He did not run. Airports are not the place for sudden movements, not anymore, not in this world. Instead, he walked. Steadily. Purposefully. Toward Gate 14. Part 5. A life built on small kindnesses. Richard Halloway had not always worn a suit and carried a hospital badge with CEO printed beneath his name. He had once been a paramedic, decades ago, driving an ambulance through the quiet streets of a small Midwestern town. He remembered nights when the radio would crackle, and he would drive fast through empty intersections, praying he would arrive in time. He remembered the weight of carrying someone who could not carry themselves. He remembered, most of all, that healthcare was never truly about buildings or budgets or boardrooms. It was about one person noticing another person's pain, and choosing to do something about it. That belief had never left him. Not after 30 years. Not after climbing every rung of the hospital ladder. And so, as he crossed that terminal floor, his heart pounding beneath his tailored suit, he was not thinking like a CEO. He was thinking like the young paramedic he used to be. Part 6. Arriving. Richard reached the row of seats near Gate 14. Colonel Delaney looked up first, his eyes sharp, assessing, an old habit from decades of watching for danger. "Can I help you?" the colonel asked, his voice calm but firm. "I recognize her scrubs," Richard said quietly, nodding toward Margaret. "She works at my hospital. Lakeside Regional. My name is Richard Halloway. I'm the CEO there." Margaret looked up, startled. Her tired eyes searched his face. "Mr. Halloway?" she whispered. "Margaret," he said gently, remembering her name now from hospital newsletters, from award ceremonies, from 100 small moments he had not paid close enough attention to until now. "Are you safe?" The question hung in the air. Simple. Direct. Warm. And Margaret, for the first time in 3 days, let herself cry. Not the quiet, controlled tears of a professional. Real tears. Tears that come when someone finally asks the right question, at the right moment, with the right kind of care. Part 7. The truth comes gently. She told them both, slowly, haltingly. About her husband, Daniel. About the shove that sent her into the kitchen counter 3 nights ago. About the collar for her whiplash, the bandage for her wrist, sprained when she caught herself against the cabinet. About how she had told everyone at work it was a car accident. About how she was flying to her mother's house in Ohio, not just to help her mother recover, but because she did not know where else in the world felt safe anymore. Colonel Delaney listened without interrupting. This, too, was something the military had taught him, that sometimes, silence is the greatest gift you can give someone who is speaking a hard truth. When she finished, he spoke. "Ma'am," he said, "in the Corps, we have a saying. No one gets left behind. That is not just for the battlefield. That is for life." Richard nodded slowly. "You are not going to be left behind, Margaret. Not today. Not on my watch." Part 8. What kindness looks like. Richard sat down on the other side of her. 2 men, strangers to each other just minutes before, now sitting like bookends of quiet strength around a woman who needed exactly that. "Here is what we are going to do," Richard said gently. "First, we are going to make sure you get to your mother safely. Second, when you are ready, not before you are ready, we will make sure you have resources back home. Legal help. Counseling. A safe place to stay, if you need one that is not your own house." "You don't have to do all that," Margaret whispered. "I know I don't have to," Richard said, his voice soft but certain. "I want to." Colonel Delaney reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notepad, the kind military men often carry out of old habit. "Ma'am, I am going to give you my number," he said. "Not because I am anyone special. But because sometimes, in this life, we need to know someone is standing by, even from a distance. You call if a flight gets delayed, if you feel afraid, if you simply need to hear another voice." Margaret took the paper. Her hands, still trembling slightly, folded it carefully, like something precious. Part 9. Boarding. The gate agent announced boarding for Margaret's flight to Columbus. She stood slowly, gathering her small carry-on bag. Richard stood with her. "I will call the hospital today," he said. "You are not going to lose your job for taking time to heal. That is a promise." "And I will call in a few days," said the colonel, "just to hear that you landed safe, and that your mother is doing all right." Margaret looked at these two men, one in a uniform of service, one in a suit of leadership, and she felt something she had not felt in 3 days. She felt seen. "Thank you," she said, her voice steadier now than it had been all morning. "Both of you. I don't know how to explain what this means." "You don't have to explain," Richard said. "We understand more than you think." Part 10, a quiet reflection. As Margaret walked down the jet bridge, Colonel Delaney and Richard Halloway stood together for a moment, watching her go. "You know," Richard said quietly, "I have been a CEO for 8 years now. Meetings, budgets, board approvals. Sometimes I forget why I started in healthcare in the first place." "And why did you?" the colonel asked. "Because someone was kind to me once," Richard said, "when I did not expect it. A stranger. On a night I will never forget. It changed the direction of my whole life." Colonel Delaney nodded slowly. "In the Corps, we call that passing it forward. You carry a kindness until you find someone else who needs it. Then you hand it off. I suppose today," Richard said, "we handed it off to her." "No," said the colonel, with the faintest smile. "Today, she handed something to us too. She reminded us both what our work was always supposed to be about." Part 11, weeks later. Margaret's mother recovered well, in time, with her daughter's steady care beside her. Margaret herself began the slow, careful process of building a new life. Legal papers were filed. A counselor's office became a quiet, weekly ritual. Old friends, once distant, drew close again. And every few weeks, her phone would ring. Sometimes it was Richard, checking in, asking how the transfer to the Columbus Hospital branch was going, the one he had personally arranged so she could be near her mother. Sometimes it was Colonel Delaney, his voice steady and warm, sharing a story from his years of service, or simply asking, "How are you sleeping these days, Margaret?" She began sleeping better. Slowly. The way healing always comes, not in a single leap, but in small, steady steps. Part 12, a signal remembered. Almost a year later, Margaret found herself back in an airport. Different city. Different gate. But this time, she was not afraid. This time, she was flying to visit an old friend, just for the joy of it. As she sat waiting to board, she noticed a young woman across the aisle. Nervous eyes. A stiffness in her shoulders that Margaret recognized instantly, the way only someone who has lived through something can recognize it in another. Margaret did not hesitate. She leaned over, gently, and asked, "Are you all right, dear?" The young woman's eyes welled with tears. "I don't know," she whispered. Margaret smiled softly, the kind of smile that comes from having walked through darkness and found the other side of it. "That's all right," Margaret said. "You don't have to know right now. You just have to let someone sit beside you for a little while." And she stayed. Just as Colonel Delaney had stayed for her. Just as Richard Halloway had crossed a crowded terminal for her. Part 13, what we carry forward. There is a simple truth in this story, one that many of us learned slowly, over the years, through our own trials and our own quiet victories. Kindness rarely announces itself with trumpets or headlines. More often, it is small. A hand raised gently in a crowded room. A stranger who notices what others overlook. A CEO who remembers he was once a paramedic. A colonel who remembers that "no one left behind" applies far beyond the battlefield. We are, all of us, capable of being someone's Colonel Delaney. Someone's Richard Halloway. Someone who notices, and chooses to act. And we are, all of us, capable of being Margaret too. Of needing help. Of raising our hand, however quietly, and trusting that someone, somewhere, will see it. Part 14, a gentle closing. If you are listening to this today, perhaps in your kitchen with a cup of coffee, perhaps in your car with the radio low, perhaps in your favorite chair as the afternoon light comes through the window, consider this. Somewhere today, someone near you is raising a quiet signal. It may not be a hand gesture. It may be a tired smile that does not quite reach the eyes. It may be a phone call that lasts a little too long, as though the person on the other end does not want to hang up just yet. It may be a neighbor who mentions, almost in passing, that things have been a bit hard lately. You do not need a uniform to notice. You do not need a title to act. You simply need to slow down, just for a moment, and truly see the person in front of you. Margaret Sullivan flew home that day, not because of grand gestures, but because two strangers chose to notice a small signal, and chose to stay. May we all be so willing to notice. And may we all, when our own moment comes, find someone willing to stay. This has been The Signal at Gate 14, a story of quiet kindness, gentle courage, and the small, steady ways we carry one another through this life. Thank you for listening. And until next time, be well, and be kind.